The nurse looked at me in shock when I said, "My husband is impotent." The truth? He had another woman pregnant, and he had no idea I'd already destroyed his entire future. My name is Rachel Colby. 6 weeks before I sat in that clinic and lied to a stranger, I found a hotel receipt in my husband Tom's gym bag. 2 weeks after that, I found a sonogram photo folded inside a jacket he'd forgotten to check before sending it to the dry cleaner. Not his child with me. His child with a 26-year-old marketing coordinator named Kayla Winthrop. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of him. I smiled, made him dinner, and started building the case that would end him a full year before he even knew I was building anything. I want to tell you the part Tom still doesn't know I know. The baby wasn't an accident on his side either. Kayla was 6 months into the relationship when she found out. Tom had told her he was already divorced. He'd shown her fake paperwork, a settlement printed on his own office letterhead, to get her to stop pushing him to leave me. She got pregnant believing she was about to become the second legitimate Mrs. Colby. She was a victim too. She just didn't know it yet. And that detail, the fake divorce papers, was the first piece of evidence I found, sitting in an unlocked folder on the family laptop. Tom never thought I'd bother opening, because in 11 years of marriage I never had. Here's who Tom Colby really was. Once I stopped looking at him through the fog of marriage. 3 weeks after I found the sonogram, at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of both our families, Tom set down his fork and announced that he was concerned about me. Said I'd been distant, cold, forgetting things. Said he'd found empty wine bottles in the garage. Bottles he'd planted there himself 2 days earlier. My mother-in-law reached over and squeezed my hand like I was something fragile. My own sister looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. He was building a narrative in front of a room full of witnesses. Unstable wife. Concerned husband. I sat there and ate my turkey and said nothing, because I understood exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just hiding an affair anymore. He was preloading a custody case. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I logged into our joint checking account to pay the mortgage and found $38,000 missing. Moved over 6 weeks, in amounts small enough that the bank's fraud alerts never triggered. $2,000 here, $3,500 there into a new account Tom had opened at a different bank, one I'd never heard of, under a name that wasn't quite his. Thomas R. Colby too, a middle initial he doesn't have, on a forged notarized signature page that also, I would later learn, carried something that looked almost exactly like my own signature. He hadn't just stolen from our marriage. He'd forged my name on a document to help himself do it. That's not infidelity anymore. That's a felony. 3 days after I found the missing money, a process server showed up at my door with an emergency custody petition. Tom was asking the court for sole custody of our 2 kids, citing concerns about the mother's mental stability and alcohol. Used the same wine bottles he'd planted himself and attaching a report from a private investigator he'd hired, claiming he had photos of me meeting an unknown man at a coffee shop 3 weeks earlier. The unknown man was my divorce attorney, Priya Reddy. I'd been meeting with her for a month already, in a different county, paying in cash, building the case Tom didn't know existed. His private investigator had accidentally photographed the very lawyer who was about to end him, and handed the photo to a judge as evidence against me. I almost laughed when Priya showed me the filing. Almost. This is where I stopped playing defense. Priya had already subpoenaed Tom's investment firm's records 6 weeks earlier quietly, before he had any idea we were coming, which meant every dollar he'd funneled into the Thomas R. Colby 2 account was locked into the court record before he even filed for custody. The forged notary signature was easy to disprove. The notary listed on the document had retired 18 months before the date on the page. She hadn't notarized anything. Tom had forged her stamp too. Then I called Kayla, not to fight her, to warn her. I told her calmly what I'd found: the fake divorce papers, the forged signatures, the pattern of a man who lies on paper the way other people breathe. I told her I didn't blame her for the pregnancy. I told her I thought she deserved to know what she was actually carrying his child into. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I have texts. Do you want them?" Before Kayla called me back with the texts, Priya called me first, and what she'd found stopped me cold. The forged notary stamp, Tom used to open the Thomas R. Colby 2 account wasn't new. Priya's investigator traced that exact forged seal to a nearly identical account opened 9 years earlier. 3 years before, Tom and I even got married under the name Thomas R. Colby. No middle initial trick needed that time, because back then nobody was looking. That account had funneled money out of a woman named Sandra Kessler's inheritance. Sandra had been engaged to Tom. She'd filed a fraud complaint with the state in 2016. The investigation had gone nowhere, quietly closed for lack of follow-up evidence. And Tom had simply changed firms, changed cities, and married me 2 years later. I wasn't his first wife-shaped target. I was his second run at the exact same con refined. And it got worse. 12 days before he filed for emergency custody of our kids, Tom had contacted the bank that held our children's trust, the one I'd already forced back into joint trusteeship, and requested a hardship withdrawal of $15,000, listing himself as sole guardian and me as deceased on the paperwork. The bank had flagged it and frozen the request pending verification, which was the only reason I was alive on paper long enough to find out about it before the money moved. He hadn't just been stealing from our marriage, he'd tried to steal from his own children, using my forged death to do it. Tom didn't just lie to Kayla about being divorced. He'd told her, 3 weeks before the custody filing, that he was going to make Rachel look unstable so the courts would side with him, and that once the divorce went through he'd have full control of the trust, money for the kids and hers too. He wasn't planning a divorce, he was planning a heist, with our children's custody as the cover story and my reputation as the collateral damage. Kayla forwarded me 61 screenshots. Then she agreed, on her own, to give a sworn statement. The custody hearing turned into something else entirely the moment Priya entered Kayla's affidavit, the forged notary documents, the frozen trust withdrawal, and the 9-year-old Sandra Kessler complaint into evidence, one after another, on the same afternoon. Tom's lawyer tried to object 3 times. The judge overruled her before she finished a sentence each time. Because you cannot argue your way around a retired notary's sworn statement, a bank's fraud hold record, and a decade-old complaint that suddenly, finally, made sense. Then Kayla testified, 7 months pregnant, voice steady. She described the fake divorce papers on Tom's own office letterhead, and repeated word for word, from saved screenshots, his plan to fabricate instability against his wife to win sole custody and control of the children's trust. I watched Tom's mother in the gallery, a woman who had squeezed my hand at Thanksgiving and called me fragile, go very still. Sandra Kessler was there too, in the second row. Priya had found her, called her, asked if she wanted to say anything. She hadn't planned to speak, but when the judge asked if anyone else present had relevant information, Sandra stood up on her own, walked to the front, and told the court that 9 years earlier a man named Thomas Colby had done almost exactly this to her, and that no one had believed her enough to stop him. This time, someone had. The custody petition wasn't just denied. The judge, on her own motion, referred the forged notarization, the falsified trust withdrawal, and the reopened Kessler complaint to the county prosecutor that same afternoon. Tom Colby pled guilty to forgery, identity-related fraud, and attempted theft from a minor's trust. That last charge carrying an enhanced sentence because the paperwork had listed his children's mother as deceased. 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation, a lifetime bar from holding any securities or fiduciary license. In the state of New Jersey, at sentencing, he asked to speak to our kids before he was taken into custody. The judge allowed it, 5 minutes supervised in a side room. I wasn't in the room. I only know what my daughter told me afterward. Sitting in the car in the courthouse garage, still in her good dress, Tom had knelt down, said he was sorry, said he loved them, said he'd made mistakes. My son, who was 9, looked at him and asked one question: did you really tell them Mom was dead? And when Tom couldn't answer that one cleanly, both kids turned and walked back out to find me, without saying goodbye. I didn't watch them put the handcuffs on him. I'd expected to want to. I didn't. I signed the last of the paperwork at the clerk's table, took my children's hands, and walked out through the big courthouse doors into ordinary afternoon light while, somewhere behind me, 2 bailiffs led Tom Colby out through a different door entirely. His mother didn't go with him. She found me in the hallway instead, and for a long moment she just stood there. And then she said, quietly, I'm sorry I called you fragile. I told her she didn't need to apologize to me. She needed to be there for her grandchildren, and she has been, every week ever since. I went back to that same clinic 18 months later for a physical. A different nurse, same intake form, same question. Are you currently sexually active? No. I told her, just a fact. No performance in it this time. People ask if I regret waiting so long to act instead of screaming the day I found that receipt. I tell them the truth. Tom needed me furious and fast. Because furious and fast is easy to spin into unstable wife in a courtroom. What he never planned for was a wife who went quiet, went patient, and let him build his entire trap out in the open, in writing, on his own letterhead, while she photographed every piece of it for a judge, and found every woman before me who'd been left holding the same lie. He thought impotence was the lie in that intake form. The real lie was that he ever thought I wasn't paying attention.